You ruined everything! This was supposed to be our future! It was never yours. I simply stopped lending it to you.
The cruelest betrayal isn't the one that happens in secret. It's the one performed under bright lights, where everyone is expected to applaud. The boarding announcement echoed through the marble terminal as passengers drifted toward the gate, their rolling suitcases humming across the polished floor like distant thunder. Jason Carter walked with the effortless confidence of a man who believed the world had already declared him the winner. Beside him, Amber Collins adjusted her designer sunglasses and laughed at something he whispered, her hand resting lightly on his arm while travelers glanced their way. Jason welcomed every curious look. He had spent years chasing admiration, and today he intended to collect every last ounce of it. He held up his phone and tilted it just right, making sure the first-class boarding sign filled the background before snapping another smiling photo. Seconds later, the picture appeared on his social media feed with a caption that felt less like a celebration and more like a message aimed at one person. Finally, traveling with the woman I deserve. Hundreds of miles away, that sentence might have disappeared into the endless stream of the internet. But today, fate made sure it traveled only a few hundred feet. Across the terminal, hidden behind the quiet privacy of an executive lounge enclosed by tall glass panels, Evelyn Carter looked up from the tablet resting on her lap as her phone vibrated once. She didn't rush to open the notification. She simply set down her coffee, folded her hands, and let the silence settle before touching the screen. The photo filled the display. Jason's familiar smile, Amber leaning comfortably against him. The words beneath the image carried more weight than they appeared to. Anyone else would have seen a couple beginning a vacation. Evelyn saw something else entirely. A performance. A carefully staged declaration meant to embarrass her without ever mentioning her name. She read the caption once, then locked the screen. Her expression never changed. Outside the lounge windows, aircraft taxied beneath a pale morning sky while sunlight reflected off polished aluminum wings. Flight crews hurried across the ramp. Business travelers checked their watches. Families gathered children before boarding. Life continued with perfect indifference. Evelyn lifted her coffee and took another slow sip. Warm, smooth, unhurried. Her breathing never changed. There were no angry messages, no dramatic phone call, no desperate attempt to stop Jason from boarding his flight. Some people mistook silence for weakness because they had never witnessed what true patience looked like. Jason certainly hadn't. As another boarding announcement called first-class passengers to the priority lane, Jason wrapped an arm around Amber's shoulders and guided her forward with exaggerated confidence. She smiled into another camera as he joked that ordinary airports were becoming boring now that private aviation was part of their lifestyle. She laughed without questioning him, believing every word. Around them, strangers smiled politely, assuming they were watching another successful couple beginning another luxurious getaway. None of them noticed the woman inside the executive lounge quietly placing her phone into her handbag before standing with perfect composure. None of them realized that the man proudly boarding first class had already begun a journey he would never forget. Because some flights take people closer to their dreams. Others carry them straight toward the truth. Evelyn stepped out of the executive lounge without attracting a single glance. Her navy cashmere coat rested neatly across one arm, and the soft rhythm of her heels blended into the steady movement of the airport around her. Thousands of people hurried toward departures with backpacks, garment bags, and coffee cups balanced in their hands, each carrying destinations, deadlines, and dreams. She moved through them with quiet purpose, never looking toward the first-class gate again. She did not need to. She already knew exactly where Jason was, because he always wanted to be seen. The large digital display near the ceiling shifted to another departing flight, while sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting long reflections across the polished stone. Evelyn paused for only a moment beside the glass, watching one aircraft lift gracefully into the bright morning sky. Years ago, that sight used to fill her with excitement because every successful flight reminded her of conversations around her father's dining table, where aviation was never simply about airplanes. It was about responsibility. It was about trust. It was about protecting the people who depended on every decision made behind the scenes. Those lessons had stayed with her long after the family dinners ended. Jason had never cared for those conversations. He preferred applause over preparation. During the early years of their marriage, he often joked that Evelyn worried too much while he focused on winning. She remembered smiling at the time, believing confidence could be a strength if it was balanced by humility. She had been wrong. Success had only magnified the parts of him that were already there. Her phone vibrated again. Another notification. Amber had uploaded a short video from the boarding bridge, laughing as Jason raised 2 champagne glasses before they even reached their seats. The caption celebrated luxury, freedom, and new beginnings. Thousands of strangers responded with admiration, unaware they were watching carefully edited moments instead of an honest life. Evelyn watched exactly 3 seconds before closing the application. She slipped the phone into her handbag without a trace of emotion. A nearby piano filled the terminal with a slow melody while an elderly couple shared a quiet breakfast at a cafe overlooking the runway. Across the hall, a young father knelt to tie his daughter's sneakers before lifting her into his arms as she giggled. The ordinary kindness surrounding her felt strangely comforting. Real happiness never seemed interested in announcing itself. It simply existed. Evelyn continued toward the private transportation exit, where a black sedan waited precisely where it always did. The driver stepped forward and opened the rear door without speaking. She thanked him with a warm smile before settling into the leather seat. As the car pulled away from the terminal, the airport gradually disappeared behind rows of palm trees and glass office buildings. Her assistant called only once. Evelyn answered calmly. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. She listened far more than she spoke, offering only a few measured responses before ending the call with a simple, "Thank you. Everything can continue as scheduled." Nothing in her voice suggested anger. Nothing suggested revenge. Outside, another aircraft climbed into the clear blue sky, becoming smaller with every passing second until it disappeared completely. Evelyn watched it vanish beyond the horizon, knowing that some departures looked permanent only because the story had not yet reached its destination. 36,000 feet above the clouds, Jason settled deeper into the wide leather seat and accepted another glass of sparkling water from the flight attendant with the relaxed smile of someone convinced he belonged exactly where he was. Amber leaned toward the window, watching endless layers of brilliant white clouds stretch beneath the aircraft like fresh snow across an untouched valley. She lifted her phone again, carefully recording every polished surface around them, from the linen table setting to the warm cabin lighting that wrapped every passenger in quiet luxury. "People are going to love this," she whispered with excitement. Jason smiled, enjoying not the scenery but the attention he imagined waiting on the other side of the screen. Every notification felt like another confirmation that he had escaped an ordinary life and stepped into the extraordinary one he believed he had built with his own hands. Amber turned toward him with genuine admiration. "I still cannot believe this is normal for you," she said. Jason laughed softly before glancing around the cabin as though every passenger should overhear the conversation. "This is actually the simple part," he replied. "Commercial first class is convenient, but it is never my favorite way to travel." Amber raised an eyebrow. "Really?" Jason nodded with complete confidence. "When we land, my private jet will already be waiting. We will fly straight to Aspen. No security lines. No waiting. No crowds. That is how I usually travel." Amber looked at him with unmistakable admiration. She imagined sleek cabins, polished wood interiors, attentive crews, and exclusive terminals that only successful people ever experienced. Every word Jason spoke painted another picture of unlimited wealth, and she accepted every detail without hesitation. He spoke naturally, as though private aviation had become as routine as driving to the grocery store. He never mentioned paperwork. He never mentioned ownership. He never mentioned the names that appeared on legal documents. In Jason's mind, using something long enough had quietly transformed into believing it belonged to him. Years of comfort had blurred the line between privilege and possession. Somewhere far below the aircraft, hidden inside an office overlooking a quiet private airfield, a digital scheduling board displayed dozens of aircraft movements planned throughout the week. Every departure, every arrival, every crew assignment followed an organized system built over decades with remarkable precision. One elegant name appeared at the top of nearly every authorization file: Carter Aviation Trust. The employees reviewing maintenance schedules hardly noticed it anymore because it had always been there. It represented stability rather than status. No one questioned its procedures because every instruction arrived with calm professionalism and careful planning. Back in the cabin, Jason opened his tablet and casually scrolled through property photos of luxury mountain homes while describing ski weekends, exclusive clubs, and private lounges as though they were ordinary parts of everyday life. Amber listened with growing admiration, believing she had found a man whose success had no limits. She never asked how those opportunities had appeared. Jason never volunteered the answer. Outside the aircraft windows, the afternoon sun painted the clouds with soft shades of gold as the airplane continued westward. Inside the quiet cabin, confidence settled comfortably beside illusion, and neither of them noticed that the foundation beneath every confident promise had already begun to shift in ways no amount of money could prevent. The aircraft touched down with barely a ripple, its wheels kissing the runway before slowing smoothly toward the terminal. Jason unfastened his seat belt almost immediately, unable to hide the satisfaction on his face. This was only the beginning of the trip he had imagined for weeks. Commercial travel, even in the finest cabin, was merely the opening chapter. The real display of success, at least in his mind, would begin once they reached the private aviation terminal on the opposite side of the airport. Amber slipped her sunglasses back on as they entered the jet bridge. She smiled at everyone they passed, enjoying the quiet attention that seemed to follow Jason everywhere. Outside the terminal windows, rows of executive aircraft shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Their polished fuselages reflected the bright blue Colorado sky, while ground crews moved with calm precision across the ramp. Amber slowed her pace for a moment, unable to hide her excitement. "Are those all private jets?" she asked. Jason followed her gaze and smiled with practiced confidence. "Some of them," he answered casually. "You get used to the view after a while." They collected only a pair of designer carry-on bags before leaving the commercial terminal through a premium transportation exit. A luxury sport utility vehicle was already waiting to drive them across the airport to the Executive Aviation Center. As the vehicle passed security gates and quiet hangars, Amber stared through the window like someone entering a world she had only seen in magazines. Every building looked immaculate. Every aircraft appeared larger than the last. She lifted her phone once more, capturing short videos of gleaming wings, private lounges, and crews preparing aircraft for departure. "People are never going to believe this," she whispered. Jason laughed. "They do not have to believe it. They only have to watch." His words carried the easy confidence of someone who had repeated the same story so many times that even he no longer questioned it. A few minutes later, the vehicle rolled to a stop beside an elegant executive terminal framed by glass walls and carefully landscaped gardens. Beyond the building stood a sleek white business jet waiting on the ramp, its engine silent, its cabin door closed, its polished exterior glowing beneath the late afternoon light. Amber's eyes widened. "Is that yours?" she asked almost breathlessly. Jason smiled without hesitation. "That is the one we usually take." The answer was carefully chosen. He did not actually say he owned it. He simply allowed the assumption to grow naturally between them. Amber accepted it without question, already imagining the photographs she would share once they were inside. They stepped into the quiet terminal where polished marble floors reflected soft lighting and fresh flowers decorated the reception desk. Everything felt calm, private, and exclusive. No crowded boarding lines. No loud announcements. Only the gentle hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of service vehicles moving outside. Jason adjusted the cuff of his jacket and walked toward the reception area with the confidence of a regular guest, expecting every familiar convenience to unfold exactly as it always had. Behind the reception desk, a young coordinator greeted them warmly before glancing at her computer screen. Her pleasant smile remained, but something almost invisible flickered across her eyes. She looked back at the monitor a second time, reading something that had appeared only moments earlier. Then, with remarkable professionalism, she lifted the telephone beside her desk and quietly said, "Could someone from operations please come to the front reception? I believe we need to review a travel authorization before today's departure. Jason rested one hand on the polished reception counter, wearing the patient smile of someone who expected every delay to solve itself in his favor. Amber wandered a few steps away, admiring framed photographs of sleek aircraft climbing into clear blue skies, while soft instrumental music drifted through the elegant terminal. The atmosphere remained calm, almost luxurious in its silence, but something subtle had changed. Employees who had greeted Jason warmly on previous visits now exchanged brief professional glances before quietly returning their attention to computer screens. No one appeared nervous. No one appeared hostile. They simply became unusually careful. A man wearing an operations badge approached the reception desk carrying a digital tablet. His expression was courteous, his posture relaxed. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," he said politely. "Thank you for your patience. We are reviewing today's departure authorization." Jason smiled with complete confidence. "There must be a mistake. We are scheduled to leave for Aspen immediately." The operations manager nodded respectfully. "That is exactly what we are verifying." Jason barely noticed the careful wording. He folded his arms comfortably and glanced toward the aircraft waiting beyond the glass. "I have used this airplane for years," he replied. "Whatever the issue is, I am sure it will take only a minute." The manager offered another professional smile before lowering his eyes to the tablet once more. Several seconds passed. Amber returned to Jason's side, her excitement beginning to fade beneath growing curiosity. "Everything is fine, right?" she asked softly. "Of course," Jason answered without hesitation. "Systems fail all the time. Someone probably forgot to update today's schedule." At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, Evelyn sat alone inside a quiet corner office overlooking another airfield. The late afternoon sunlight stretched across hardwood floors while a row of aircraft stood motionless beyond expansive windows. Her desk remained almost perfectly clear except for a leather notebook, a fountain pen, and a single secure tablet displaying flight operations. She listened quietly as her executive assistant completed a brief summary. "The authorization review has reached the operations desk," the assistant explained. "No further action is required unless you wish to modify your instruction." Evelyn looked out toward the runway where a maintenance crew carefully inspected an arriving aircraft. She remained silent for several thoughtful seconds before speaking in the same calm voice she had used throughout the day. "No modifications," she said. "Please allow standard procedure to continue." "Understood, Mrs. Carter." The call ended immediately. Evelyn placed the tablet face down and wrapped both hands around a warm cup of tea. There was no satisfaction on her face, no celebration, no trace of revenge, only the quiet composure of someone allowing truth to arrive without interference. Back inside the executive terminal, the operations manager received a secure notification. He read it carefully, confirmed the reference number twice, then inhaled slowly before walking back toward Jason. The reception staff grew noticeably quieter. A pilot standing near the lounge glanced toward the aircraft outside before checking his watch and calmly closing his flight folder. Nothing dramatic happened. No raised voices interrupted the peaceful atmosphere. Yet an invisible current had shifted through the building, changing the direction of every conversation. The operations manager stopped in front of Jason and spoke with unwavering professionalism. "Mr. Carter, thank you again for waiting. We have completed our review. Before today's flight can proceed, we must resolve a change that was entered by the primary authorization holder earlier this afternoon." Jason frowned for the first time all day. "Primary authorization holder?" he repeated slowly. "Who exactly are you talking about?" Jason let out a short laugh, convinced the question itself was ridiculous. He adjusted the sleeve of his tailored jacket and glanced toward Amber with the confident smile he had worn throughout the entire trip. "There has to be some misunderstanding," he said. "I have been flying through this terminal for years. Whoever updated your system can correct it in less than a minute." The operations manager remained calm. His expression never changed. He looked down at the tablet once more before answering with careful professionalism. "I understand your concern, Mr. Carter. Unfortunately, this authorization cannot be restored by our local staff." Jason's smile faded slightly. "Then call whoever needs to approve it." "The request did not come from our operations department," the manager replied. "It came directly from the primary authorization holder through the executive control system." Amber looked from Jason to the manager, sensing that something no longer fit the confident picture she had been shown all day. "Does that mean someone canceled the flight?" she asked quietly. The manager chose his words with remarkable care. "The aircraft has not been removed from today's schedule. Only the passenger authorization associated with Mr. Jason Carter has been withdrawn." Silence settled over the reception area. Even the soft piano music seemed distant now. Jason stared at the manager for several seconds before speaking again. "Withdrawn," he repeated. "That is impossible." The manager turned the tablet so Jason could view the screen. Personal information remained hidden for privacy, but one line stood out clearly. "Passenger authorization status, inactive." Jason blinked twice as though the words refused to make sense. "Refresh the system," he said. "Please." The manager complied immediately. The loading icon appeared, disappeared, and the same message returned. Nothing changed. Amber folded her arms without realizing she had done so. The excitement that had filled her voice only minutes earlier had quietly disappeared. She glanced through the glass toward the elegant aircraft waiting on the ramp. It looked exactly the same as before, beautiful, polished, and ready for departure. Yet no one was preparing the cabin. No pilot was walking toward the airplane. No ground crew was loading luggage. It was as though the entire operation had paused around one invisible decision. Jason pulled out his own phone and searched through old contacts with increasing urgency. He called a former flight coordinator. Straight to voicemail. He called another executive assistant. No answer. He sent 2 quick messages requesting immediate confirmation. Neither received a response. For the first time that afternoon, certainty gave way to confusion. The routine he had relied upon for years was no longer unfolding as expected. Behind the reception desk, another employee quietly removed the planned departure folder from the active schedule and placed it into a separate tray marked pending authorization. No one announced the change. No one made a scene. Every movement remained respectful and orderly, making the silence feel even heavier. Jason looked back at the operations manager. "Tell me who made this decision." The manager hesitated for only a moment before answering honestly. "I am not authorized to disclose that information. However, our executive administration has already requested that legal representation meet with you here before any additional discussion takes place." Jason frowned. "Legal representation?" The manager nodded once. "Yes, sir. They are already on their way." Outside, the white business jet remained motionless beneath the bright Colorado sky, waiting exactly where it had been all afternoon. While inside the quiet terminal, Jason slowly realized that the airplane had never stopped being available. It had simply stopped being available to him. The quiet rhythm of the executive terminal was interrupted only by the soft sound of polished dress shoes approaching across the marble floor. Every employee instinctively stepped aside with respectful professionalism as a silver-haired attorney carrying a slim black leather portfolio entered the reception area. He was neither hurried nor dramatic. His calm demeanor suggested that he had handled conversations like this many times before. Jason straightened his posture, relieved that someone with authority had finally arrived. "Good," he said confidently. "There has obviously been an administrative mistake. I would appreciate it if we could clear this up quickly." The attorney offered a polite nod before extending his hand. "Mr. Carter, my name is Richard Lawson. I serve as legal counsel for Carter Aviation Trust." Jason shook his hand without hesitation, believing the introduction confirmed exactly what he expected. "Then you already know who I am." Richard met his eyes with quiet professionalism. "Yes, Mr. Carter. That is precisely why I am here." He opened the portfolio and carefully removed a single folder sealed with an official document tab. The atmosphere inside the terminal seemed to grow even quieter as he placed the folder gently upon the reception counter. Amber watched with growing uncertainty while several employees respectfully turned their attention elsewhere, allowing the conversation as much privacy as possible. Richard opened the folder and revealed a formal authorization document bearing the trust's embossed seal. He did not rush. Every page was handled with deliberate care. "Earlier this afternoon," he began, "our office received a fully authenticated executive instruction through the trust's secured authorization system." Jason folded his arms. "From whom?" Richard looked down at the final page before turning it toward Jason. At the bottom of the document rested a single elegant signature. "Evelyn Carter." Jason stared at the name without speaking. The terminal around him seemed strangely distant, as though every surrounding sound had been muted. Richard continued in the same composed tone. Effective immediately, all travel privileges previously extended to Mr. Jason Carter under discretionary authorization have been revoked. Jason looked up sharply. That cannot be right. I have used these aircraft for years. Richard nodded respectfully. Yes, you have. Then I have standing authorization. Respectfully, no, sir. Richard gently turned another page. You had usage privileges. Those privileges were granted by the primary authority overseeing Carter Aviation Trust. They were never permanent ownership rights. Amber slowly looked from Jason to the document and back again. The confidence she had admired throughout the day was beginning to fracture beneath details she had never imagined asking about. Jason reached for the folder and quickly scanned several paragraphs, his expression changing with every line. Legal terminology gave way to unmistakable language. Beneficiary access, executive discretion, revocable authorization, final approval. None of the documents listed him as an owner. His name appeared only as an approved user operating under continuing authorization. Richard quietly removed one final page from the folder. There is one additional statement from the trust administration. Jason looked at him without speaking. Beginning today, all future requests involving trust aircraft, facilities, flight crews, executive terminals, and associated transportation assets must receive direct written approval from Mrs. Evelyn Carter before any reservation can be accepted. No one in the terminal reacted. There was no whispering, no judgment, only respectful silence. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight reflected across the white aircraft that had never moved an inch. For the first time since arriving, Jason finally understood what every employee had known from the beginning. The airplane had never been his. He had simply spent years borrowing access from the one person he believed had always needed him. Evelyn was finishing a quiet dinner on the terrace of a lakeside hotel, nearly 100 miles away, when the evening breeze carried the scent of pine through the air. The sky had softened into shades of amber and deep blue as the last sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. A small lantern flickered gently on the table beside her untouched dessert, while distant ripples moved peacefully across the water. She had chosen this place years earlier because no one came here to impress anyone else. People came to breathe. Her phone rested face down beside her coffee until it vibrated once with a secure notification. She lifted it calmly and read only a single line. Authorization update completed successfully. She locked the screen again without replying. Across the airport, Jason remained frozen beside the reception desk, the legal documents still open before him. The carefully organized pages answered questions he had never thought to ask during his marriage. Carter Aviation Trust had been established decades before he met Evelyn. The aircraft fleet, executive hangars, maintenance facilities, pilot contracts, insurance policies, and operating agreements all traced back to the Carter family. Even the exclusive membership that had opened private terminals around the country existed under the trust's executive account. His access had always depended on one signature. He simply had never realized whose signature it was. Richard Lawson quietly closed the folder after allowing Jason enough time to absorb every page. Mrs. Carter preferred that operational decisions remain invisible to public attention. He explained with genuine respect. She believed leadership worked best when it allowed others to receive recognition. Amber listened in complete silence. Memories that had seemed unimportant only hours earlier suddenly began connecting together. She remembered every restaurant employee greeting Jason warmly before discreetly acknowledging Evelyn whenever she happened to appear. She remembered business dinners where executives always stood when Evelyn entered the room, even though Jason had been the one giving speeches. She remembered flight crews thanking Evelyn personally before every departure, while Jason accepted the attention as though it naturally belonged to him. None of those moments had seemed unusual until now. Jason lowered himself into a nearby leather chair, his confidence replaced by quiet disbelief. Fragments of the past surfaced one after another. The first luxury aircraft he had ever flown. Evelyn arranging everything before he arrived. Exclusive invitations appearing without explanation. Executive retreats. International business lounges. Preferred reservations. Every convenience had always been waiting. He had accepted them so often that gratitude slowly transformed into entitlement. Richard spoke again, his voice measured and respectful. Mrs. Carter never corrected those assumptions. She instructed our entire organization to treat you with the same courtesy extended to any member of her immediate family. Jason looked toward the enormous windows where the white aircraft still reflected the fading evening light. For years he had admired that airplane as proof of his own success. Now he saw it differently. It had never represented his achievements. It represented Evelyn's quiet generosity. She had never competed for attention because she had never needed it. She had built her life on foundations that did not require applause. Amber slowly removed the expensive sunglasses resting on top of her head and held them silently in her hands. The glamorous story she had admired throughout the day no longer existed. It had dissolved beneath a single truth that no photograph, no social media post, and no carefully rehearsed image could hide. Outside, ground crews began preparing another aircraft for departure under the warm glow of runway lights, while Jason finally understood that the greatest privilege he had ever enjoyed was not flying aboard extraordinary airplanes. It had been sharing a life with the extraordinary woman who had quietly opened every door without ever asking to be thanked. The following morning arrived with the quiet certainty of a new season. Mist floated above the lake as the first rays of sunlight painted the water in soft shades of gold. Evelyn stood alone at the end of a wooden dock, a light coat resting across her shoulders while she watched the calm surface stretch toward distant mountains. There were no photographers waiting for her. No audience. No celebration. The previous day had already become part of the past, and she had no desire to relive it. Her assistant approached with a small leather portfolio containing the day's schedule. "Your aircraft is ready whenever you are, Mrs. Carter," he said respectfully. Evelyn smiled with quiet gratitude before accepting the folder. She reviewed only the first page, signed one routine authorization, and handed it back. "Thank you. Let us head home." Less than an hour later, a black sedan arrived at a private airfield tucked quietly beyond the lakeside highway. The crew greeted Evelyn warmly, not with exaggerated admiration, but with the familiarity reserved for someone they genuinely respected. A captain stepped forward with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. Everything has been prepared exactly as requested." Evelyn thanked every member of the crew by name before walking toward the waiting aircraft. She never hurried. She never looked back. She climbed the polished stairway with the same calm grace she had carried throughout every difficult moment of her life. Inside the cabin, sunlight poured through oversized windows, illuminating handcrafted wood finishes and soft cream leather seats. She settled beside the window with a notebook and a cup of fresh coffee rather than a camera or a telephone. As the aircraft slowly taxied toward the runway, she opened the notebook to a blank page and quietly wrote a single sentence. "Some doors close not because life becomes smaller, but because it is finally making room for the right future." She closed the notebook just as the engines gently accelerated and the aircraft lifted into the clear morning sky. Hundreds of miles away, Jason remained in a hotel room overlooking the city. His luggage sat untouched near the door. The expensive watch on his wrist, the tailored suit hanging in the closet, and the luxury car waiting downstairs suddenly felt strangely insignificant. Throughout the night, he had replayed countless memories, each revealing details he had ignored for years. Evelyn had never argued about recognition because she had never measured her worth through applause. She had built quietly, protected quietly, and loved quietly. Only after her silence disappeared did he finally hear everything it had been saying. Amber packed her belongings without anger or accusation. She simply understood that the image she had admired had never been the complete truth. Sometimes disappointment arrived not through lies alone, but through assumptions left unquestioned. High above the clouds, Evelyn looked out across an endless blue horizon as the aircraft settled into a smooth climb. The world below grew smaller with every passing mile, but her future seemed to expand with every heartbeat. She had not taken anything away from Jason that belonged to him. She had only stopped carrying what he had mistaken as his own. Peace, she realized, was never about proving someone wrong. It was about no longer needing their permission to keep moving forward. And somewhere beyond the bright horizon, where the sky met tomorrow without asking anyone for approval, Evelyn finally understood that she had not won because someone else had lost. She had won because she had found herself again.